Whoa! Welcome to the What's Our Verdict podcast. We fashion ourselves cinematic Judge and Jerry. My name is JJ Crowder. I'm here with my co-host Mattson Heiner,
Better red than dead.
Alec Burgess,
Let's get it.
and we have a very special guest today with us hosting, Taylor Heiner.
Hi.
Yes,
Original.
perfect
Very
catchphrase.
original.
I like
Hey,
it.
you didn't prep me for this.
Hey, see, and I like her already. She's blaming
It's
you.
my fault. It's always
Yes.
my fault.
I never
It
am
absolutely
blamed.
is.
Therapist. We gaslight.
Absolutely.
Our audience was wondering who Taylor Heiner is. It's not my sister. This is my wife.
I'm stuck with them, guys.
I mean, by choice.
Gingers have no soul, so we'll keep them.
I like it. Soulless gingers.
We love them anyways.
I used to have ginger in here. All that white shit you see in my beard, that used to be red. Now it's white.
It's like the Yorkie coloring.
I do.
Just go around and pet it.
I love it. And, people do, and I'm okay with it. So it's a great intro. I like this. We should do this more often. We are here to talk about Moon Knight, Season 1, Episode 3. Took some twists and turns this episode. But I want to jump in and I'm just going to get Taylor right in on this thing because we've mentioned you on the podcast when we talked about Moon Knight a couple times now. You are a therapist, so you kind of know this world that we're in, and Mattson's told us you're kind of intrigued by what's happening, and we certainly are. DID, I have no idea. I know that there's a lot of portrayals in media and television. You hear about it and see it, and I'm curious because I've heard that in the past, a lot of times TV shows, movies get it wrong.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering how is Moon Knight doing when it comes to DID?
I say it's about 75%, correct. So DID is an interesting one. It was originally called multiple personality disorder, but our new diagnosing manual changed it. So if you break down the name, it's dissociative identity disorder. Dissociation is a term that we use a lot. So a lot of people have it with depression, anxiety, PTSD. It's that feeling of being out of your body. So a lot of people will describe it as being separate from the experience and kind of almost experiencing it out of their body. Like some say they're looking down on their body when they're doing it. Others say they can't really feel the sensory system in their body, like their 5 senses are off. So it's interesting why they named it dissociative identity disorder, because it's saying that there's separate personalities or separate beings within yourself. So I thought that was fascinating why they changed it. I kind of went back and looked it up because I learned it as multiple personality disorder at first. And then now it's still in the personality section, like when we diagnose, but it's very different how they classify it. But it's interesting how the show portrays it, because Matt was asking me last night, some of the stuff we were watching the 3rd episode, and him talking to himself, that's not a thing. That's you can't just look at your reflection and be let me pull out this person. You don't really get a choice of pulling out a personality. It's more that personality is present based off a trigger or an activator point. So if you know anything about it, how nerdy do you want me to go, guys?
Go.
Super nerdy?
Yeah,
okay.
I love it.
Well,
I love
okay,
psych stuff.
a good example of a trigger point probably would be if when Steven in the beginning episodes maybe picked up a gun because his real personality is Mark Spector. Could that take him there maybe?
Yeah, so understanding what dissociative identity disorder is, DID, it's actually a trauma response. So it usually comes in people. It's 1% of the population will develop this, guys. So I have clients coming in and being oh, I have DID. No, honey, you just have hormones, right? So they're all trying to diagnose themselves off TikTok, and it's
Fair enough.
this, yeah. Especially teenage girls are I'm so emotional. It's you're emotional because you're crazy. Which I love them to death. But
I love that.
what?
You can say that. We can't.
Oh yeah, I can say it because I work with them. But what it really is it originates from a significant trauma in somebody's life. So usually it's something like sexual abuse that's really bad, like heavy sexual abuse. Not that any of them is worse, just heavy, high traumatic situations that are more complex. Complex trauma means there's multiple situations that are life-threatening or harmful to a person that pile on top of each other. So you can look back and there's just a bunch of situations all together. Other things that are natural disasters can trigger it. For our character, if you look at him, I think it's his life as a military man, because he was hired as a militant right before he became Khonshu's like avatar.
Mhm.
And you can see that that's where he kind of switched and created, because at first I was like, what's his second personality? Is Steven his primary and then Mark's his secondary, or is it vice versa? And it looks like Mark's the primary. That's his trauma one, that, and then he created Steven to escape. So the personalities are meant to be an escape and a guard. And usually there'll be a personality very opposite. Steven's naive. Like he doesn't know anything and he loves the history. Like it's complete opposite of Mark. Mark is very tainted by the world and very guarded and aggressive. And Steve is very loving and like even his suit. So everything portraying his personality is a complete opposite. And that's kind of what DID is, where you're going to have complete opposites building together. There can be different ethnicities of personalities. It's pretty much meant to be guarder. So usually there's going to be an aggressor personality, a protector, a soft one. And then based off what that person needs, they'll develop a different level of personalities to fulfill that.
So what's the most personalized? Because one thing that they did hint on in this episode is there's a third. You can have up to 100.
I researched it pretty good. It's common to have 3 to 5.
Sure.
But up to 100, I was like, holy crap. Like, it's a lot.
Man, that's
but
insane.
Think how fractured your mind has to be and how much trauma you have to fracture your mind that much. Because each personality is a guard for a wound. Like,
for a purpose.
For a purpose. It's meant to serve to protect or to escape. So each one is serving that escapism. And that's where it's like, shoot, like what happened to them if they have 100?
I mean, you keep hearing how amazing the human brain is. So thinking of 100 personalities, it's like the best supercomputer known to humanity. So, I mean, I guess, but that would be exhaustive. Like
they don't know when they switch either. So it is accurate when they show them blacking out. Like you don't really know what happens and you don't know what you're doing in those moments.
I was going to say, because the first episode, especially, they don't interact until and it's him and Khonshu talking, but you don't see Mark and you don't, and today, or not today, but in this episode, the third one, you see that there's a third one.
Yeah.
And most likely that's a reference. They may not play that character, that personality again, but that's most likely Jake Lockley. That's the third prominent one in the comics. So that's who my assumption is. And it was interesting to me in this one because you can see the trigger almost where Mark is battling with Steven in that obviously not accurate way to the real disorder, but the violent nature, Steven's like, back off. And then this Jake Lockley, or this third personality, doesn't give a shit. Like, because he murdered everybody.
I think it's cool, though, how they did show him talking to himself, because it's almost like that internal conflict with emotions that does activate the change with the person. Because what's happening is they're feeling split between two emotions and the brain can't separate that. So with trauma, a lot of times it's really complex emotions. So I work with a lot of trauma, especially teenage girls that have been molested or stuff like that. And oftentimes they're molested by people they care about. So they have this dichotomous relationship where these two very drastic emotions are separated, where they have affection for that person, but then they have this deep distaste or anger and hurt and grief and all these other ones. So what's happening is they're pulled between those. And I like how the show is showing that part of trauma, where there is this internal fight and they're trying to sort through the emotions. So Steven is so opposite, but it's those emotions where he's like, I want to be good, I don't want to kill people. And then on the backside, it's, I got to be the aggressor. It's fascinating.
Interesting. It is fascinating.
Yeah.
And you kind of see it too. I liked the moment at the end, or near the end of the episode, where Layla and two things, right? You have Steven having this conversation with Layla, and you can see the raw affection that's there versus on Mark, who's, they've intimated that there's something happened. Most likely he killed her father or was involved in that in some way, shape, or form. And so that being able to separate those two personalities and see just the pure love that he has for Layla is very interesting to me, because it's not like myself where I see Casey and that can come out, or the other side can come out depending on where we're at during the day and what's happening. So that was very interesting to me to see that separation. Steven's not tainted by any of the past trauma, as you say, in their marriage and the things that have gone on. And so all you see is just this love for this woman that in theory he really doesn't even know, right? So I really found that intriguing, and kudos to Oscar Isaac, because he's playing this character like crazy well.
It's so complex to play because even understanding the differences in the core personalities that they're creating is huge, because everything that's motivating Steven versus motivating Mark is totally different. And that's what you got to remember when people are switching into these personalities, their whole essence is changing, their whole drive for life, what they actually want from it is altering. And that's what he's able to portray, which is pretty cool. At the same time, it's interesting because at first I was like, are they trying to mix schizophrenia with DID? And I was totally confused because I was like, is he trying to like throw that in there too and like make it a part of his personality? But delusions are a part of that, and hallucinations. I looked it up to make sure I was correct, and it is. So then Khonshu, even that, you're like, is Khonshu a part of the storyline then in his head and not so much a reality? And as he created that, and that made me like second guess that. I was like, that could totally be a part of his hallucinations and explain Khonshu and everything else, or it could be a part of the story. But I think the psych part's cool.
That's really cool.
Well, I thought the acting by JJ, what's the actor's name again? Isaac Oscarson?
Oscar Isaac.
Oscar Isaac. There we go. Backwards. The part where he is in front of the truck in the desert, and when he has to switch over to Steven, and it happens like instantaneously. I mean, you could just see the change in his facial expressions like immediately. And that's a testament to good acting, because I that's hard to do.
Yeah. I'm thoroughly obsessed with Oscar Isaac in this show. And I liked him before. He's done great stuff in movies and TV before this. But in this show, like, it's so intriguing. Like you said, Mattson, where he's even the softness of his face, to be able to switch from that hard to that soft to even harder, and then the confusion. It's just so interesting. And I love the way they're playing it with the mirrors, to the point that he gets pissed and rips the mirror off the truck at the end to switch over. But yeah, really, really intriguing episode. So and then Taylor, I'm back to you. And just because I'm obsessed with this, I love the idea of the psych part of this.
It's fascinating.
When you say 75%, is it mostly the fact that they're communicating with each other that's off, or are there some other things as well?
Yeah, I think it's like little slight details too. Like some of the shifts or the activators aren't probably going to be, I mean, okay, this is where it gets really nitty gritty, right? You have to know the trauma that happened, and you have to know why those are as activators. So some of the stuff I'm like, would that really activate somebody for him to all of a sudden be Steven and then for him not to be? And I think that's where I get a little hung up on it. And then the components, he should have more anxiety. Mark is super calm, but it doesn't show that he should have that pull between them, because that's usually common. Depression is usually common, which we saw that in Steven more. So I just think some of the side effects that, like, when you have DID, there's going to be more mental health stuff pulled into that. And I don't know if we necessarily see that all the way, but it's also not going to fit the show. So
Sure. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you for all that information.
You're welcome. It's a good dump.
Yeah. And now I feel like I'm going to be the weird transition. There's no way to transition from this, because there was a lot of Marvel reveals. So we're going some very interesting psychology to, let me talk about Marvel shit, because there was a lot of interesting things, and not necessarily for the comics, because again, I don't know a lot about the comic version of this character, but I know a lot about the MCU, and there were some huge reveals for the overall MCU world. They were subtle, they were quiet, and if you don't pay attention,
thank goodness for you, JJ, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, and Alec probably saying, like, no idea. So lay these Easter eggs and whatnot upon us, JJ.
Yeah, so there's two things, and I'll start with the smaller one that has less implications, even though still huge. The Black Panther, so this pantheon of gods, the Black Panther goddess is part of that pantheon, because Egypt is part of Africa. It's not very far from Wakanda. And so Bast is the goddess for the Black Panther universe. Like, that's their, when you see all the Black Panther statues and things like that, like, they worship. And I think Black Panther in his movie mentioned, I think T'Challa mentioned Bast and the afterlife that they go to or whatnot. And so she's part of that. And there was imagery of the Panther goddess within the pyramid when they were inside of Giza during the trial, there was one goddess, and there's two in Egyptian mythology. There's two panther gods, and they're siblings. And so I'm assuming that the one, and I don't even remember the name of the one that was in this, because the one woman was sitting in front of a panther statue as her god, and then they hinted at another one. There was a little quick clip of another one, so laying out that these two characters are connected, and in the comics they are. They're both part of the Avengers at some point. They're both part of a darker version, and then the West Coast Avengers, I know he was in it, but then there was some other touches on that. So that was one big thing, is here's a connection between these pantheons, and that leads us to another one. Is we're getting another set of pantheons.
I have a
Oh
question.
yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
So I love mythology,
Mhm.
and I was curious: is Khonshu actually a real god, or is that a made-up god for this story?
No,
and
he
he-
is. Yeah, he's real.
He was a real one. Was he like
Mm-hmm.
one of their core ones, or was he one of the outside ones?
He's more one of the outer. He's one of the smaller deities, but
He's
he's
not
part
like
of
Ra
their.
or like any of the major core ones.
No, he is part of the 9. So they have 9. Well,
Okay.
it depends on who you ask. There's 7 or 9, and they show a grid in the first episode of this that Steven's kind of geeking out over, and there's
Mhm.
one big
Mhm.
one, and most of the gods that you saw in this, and then they mentioned other ones that aren't there and have chosen
Mhm.
not to be on Earth. Most of those are your major gods, but Khonshu's in there. I mean, he's the god of the moon and vengeance. And
Okay.
so he's there, but he's a child of a major, and I don't even remember.
Okay, so it's like in the Greek mythology where they have kids, and then
Mhm.
it's a whole connection. I love
Yeah.
mythology. Okay, thanks.
Me too. I'm
It's fascinating, and their stories. It
tickled.
shows so much psych of the people. Like,
Yeah.
if you look at why they created it, it's so much psychology and sociology of them.
Yep.
Oh.
It's so intriguing.
Yes.
And there's more coming. I'm about to excite you even more.
Oh yeah.
So we're going to do a trailer review of a trailer reaction later of Thor. And I haven't seen it. I held off,
Thor's fabulous.
ladies and gentlemen. That's
Wow.
hard for me.
For those that listen, for JJ to say those words,
Yeah.
I've actually never heard him utter those, because every time I watch something with him, he's like already seen it.
Yeah. It was
Probably means it's shit.
rough. no, believe
But I like how Alec was quiet until now, and that's his
Yeah.
first line.
Exactly. It's probably shit. No, but that's it was really hard. Like luckily I had a very busy day at work, and then I came home and I made dinner, and then I got ready for this, and I was like, okay, I'm just not going to watch it. So it was about 6 hours after I found out that it came out that I was like, son of a bitch, I want to watch this so bad. But probably the last time I'll hold off for that long to watch a trailer.
6
So,
hours.
Yeah, I can't.
Do you have like notification of these things? How do you
Yes.
keep up with this?
I run a podcast about movies. It's hard not to.
I guess I'm really good at Lulu, so I get it.
Yeah, I get a
Pick up
dozen.
Lululemon every day.
Telling you, the things that get us. But I get like a dozen notifications, and that one popped. And this one's like set a record, because before the Incredible Hulk or something had a record for like 93 days before the release. It was like the shortest time before the release. That I don't know. This movie, everybody, nerds have been losing their shit for weeks about not having a podcast or a trailer for this movie.
It was
Yeah,
funny.
because it comes out in July, so like people are
Nerds.
losing their minds. They're like, it's April and we haven't seen anything. Like, shut up.
Star
Who
Wars big
cares?
for you too, JJ.
Huge. I mean, duck right up there. That whole half of the shelf over. Wait, I fucking hate cameras. Sorry about the swear. All that is nothing but Star Wars.
Did you just say sorry about the swearing?
Yeah, dude. I
Do you
I
know
don't
what
care
I
if
do
I
all
offend
day?
you guys. I know, but
Usually
like,
it's at me. It's usually a
it's-
F you.
well,
So
not
it's better
well-
that I'm not getting told to F off.
hang out in the podcast long enough, and I probably will at some point.
Especially with my movie taste. Matt's gonna tell you. You probably
that'll
love it.
happen. Yeah.
Okay,
So
next nerdy.
haven't seen it. Next thing, I know for a fact that due to my nerd level status and all the research I do, that Thor is introducing at least part of the Greek pantheon. So
Ooh.
Zeus will
Taylor's
be
gonna
in
like that.
Thor.
Yeah.
And I don't know how far they're going to go, because what they did with the Eternals kind of throws a wrench in some of that shit, because at least Athena in the Eternals hinted at part of the Greek Parthenon, right?
Uh-huh.
So now you're like, wait, where does she fit within this? Because you are getting Zeus. What's his? Oh God, I can't think of his name now. What's
Hera?
the dude? No, the actual actor that's playing Zeus is Gladiator. What's his name?
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe is playing Zeus in the new
Thank you.
Thor movie. So appreciate that. So he's going to be in that. The other thing that this touches on that we have coming is more, I mean, obviously Thor. So we now have, this is 3 pantheons of gods that we've introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And obviously Thor is the biggest one always, but the Greek one has like some pretty big names. Like Athena is actually different from Athena.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if they'll have the actual Athena. Ares has already been shown in the last Thor movie when they're on Sakaar, the big sculptures that Hulk had his face on and they were working on, and then all the champions. Ares was one of those. So he was in. They've already hinted at some of that, but we're supposed to see quite a bit more of that, of Pantheon. So I'm all about the mythology. It's exciting.
I like it.
All right, last nerdgasm. This one's the big one and has huge implications for the MCU and the new big bad villain.
Did you?
And
What
that
does the nerdgasm sound like?
Don't go there.
No, I want to know now too.
Go. Come on, JJ,
I don't
you
know
got
how
it.
to make that noise because it depends on which universe I'm nerdgasming over.
Right
what
now we're
does Star
talking about
Wars sound like?
mythology.
Mythology, MCU. Yeah, I'm not going to go there. I'm stopping.
Good choice. Keep
Yeah.
your name,
Yeah.
reputation up.
I've stooped to some pretty low levels. I'm going to stop right there. But yeah, so Kang the Conqueror, they're part of the comics with Kang the Conqueror, who was introduced in, if you've seen the Loki television show, he was introduced at the end. A Kang variant was introduced at the end. That was where we first got hints of the multiverse, was the end of the Loki show. Yeah, so that guy becomes one of the greatest villains in all of MCU, called Kang the Conqueror. Kang the Conqueror, or Kang in general, almost all of the variants of Kang. Kang is a future guy that learns time travel, learns how to not only travel through time, but also through the different universes. So he can travel the entire multiverse through technology. There's so many implications. I could talk for an hour about this whole thing, but when Moon Knight's fighting those kids, the guys, and then the one kid that had the jean jacket on, when he's getting ready to throw him off the cliff and you see that image on the back, that is almost an identical matchup to the Kang version of the comics when he went back as a human and used his technology to become a god in ancient Egypt, so that he was worshipped as a god. His name in there, I got to look it up because it's one of those weird.
My brain's hurting.
I know it.
I'm gonna go back and
Ramatut.
watch
So
this.
Kang the Conqueror takes on the name Ramatut in ancient Egypt. That image looks
Was it
like
a pharaoh?
Tutankhamun is who you're probably King Tut.
Tutankhamun. Yeah, I know King
Tut.
Tut.
Yeah,
but
King Tut is his
yeah.
real name was Tutankhamun. Yeah,
It's a terrible
just
name.
started with it is a terrible name.
Poor guy. It's made
but-
fun of on the playground.
Pretty much.
Not the Pharaoh.
So if you want to look up if you Google, I'll give you an assignment. Google Pharaoh Ramatut, Rama.
What, we got homework?
Tut. Yeah, you got homework, bitch. So you go Ramatut. When you look this up, it's going to be some big goofy dude sitting on a throne with a scepter. But look at his face. He's got a helmet on, and the helmet. And then if you blank his face out, it looks just like the image on the back of that kid's jacket. So they're hinting at Kang. Now, the other thing that they did was in the big trial with all the gods and their avatars, the gods talked about leaving Earth because the humans turned away from them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Kang did as Ramatut was take all of the worship from the old ancient Egyptian gods and had it on him. And one of the comic things with the MCU, or the Marvel things with comics with gods, is they lose a lot of their power when people stop worshiping them. So they leave and they're off in their own. They mentioned it like the underworld. I don't remember what it's called, but they mention that all these gods are in a different dimension that keeps them safe from everything that's going on Earth, but they have their avatars. But this is like the biggest Kang reveal other than the end of Loki, that this dude's on his way. He's already caused an impact in the MCU. And for those that haven't seen the Loki, I won't say what all he's done, but basically everything that's happened in the MCU to this date, from Iron Man 1 to Endgame, and is partially created or caused by a variant of Kang. So we're getting some serious deep cut lore, and all of this shit is connecting, and it's about to get crazier than it already is. So I was like tickled when I started seeing all this shit. I was like, oh my God.
And all I had was that guy with the knife, his weird dance on the top of the roof. Fuck.
Which was a really funny part, by the way. Are we gonna dance or fight? So yeah, there's my my deep cut lore for Marvel.
I feel like I get lost in all this though. How am I supposed to track that between everything? Because we're lucky I made it through Endgame.
Text JJ.
Yeah.
But that's like, but all
what a
these
lot
like
of people
hidden
do.
nuggets. I'm like, do they do this? But like, how many people are actually catching this? Like people like me? No. We just watch it
Yeah.
and say they punch each
Taylor
other. and
is
that's
the
it.
quintessential common folk.
Hey,
Ooh.
you need me
hey,
because I
but
bring
common
real
folk in it-
perspective.
that's
But
right.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, because
You're
I'm
just-
like I would never. Yeah.
Well, and to be honest with you, and I've said this to these guys before, sometimes I wish I didn't know all the shit that I know, because what's going to happen is if you aren't on the podcast all the time with me ruining shit and sending you down rabbit holes that you don't need to go down,
Yeah,
because
screw
they
you.
do such a great job with Marvel. Kevin Feige, with all these shows and the movies and the way it all connects, at some point there's going to be this bomb that gets dropped in a show, in a movie somewhere, that connects all of these things that they've been doing over the last 6 to 8 months. And we're all going to go, and everyone that's not me is going to go, holy shit, I didn't see that coming. And I'm sitting here going, ooh, are they going to do that in Ant-Man and the Multiverse, or the Ant-Man and the whatever Quantumania movie? Because they're introducing Kang's going to be in that in some way, shape, or form.
Who
So
is
it's like
Kang?
Kang
say
the
it's
Conqueror.
Kang.
He's
But like,
he's
is
the
that Egyptian
new-
mythology? Is that like which mythology is that, or is that just a
that's
new
pure
superhero?
Marvel. That's pure Marvel.
See, they
He
just pulled
is-
him out of nowhere. I'm like, where did this come from?
He's the new
Thanos.
Thanos. He's going to be the new Thanos.
But wasn't there a new
purple.
Thanos in like the other one with the Eternals with the guy that looked like a robot?
Oh, the Celestials? Nah, those guys are like the truest version of a god in the Marvel universe,
What
because
does that
they-
mean? So the
things
other
they
ones aren't.
create. They like, so the one thing about Thor and even like Khonshu, they don't create anything.
Okay.
They're just there, and they have great
What do they
powers, and
do? Just
the
destroy things?
Celestials create to destroy. They were creating a new celestial, which will then create more worlds and more people, and then they'll destroy more so that more can be created. That was the conundrum in the Eternals: was, do we let this thing destroy Earth so that it can then create millions more planets with life on them? So they're as close to the definition of a god.
But then you throw in Kang. Like
Well,
it
Kang
sounds
doesn't
like
create.
Kang, by the way. Like
Kang,
that's a terrible
I know.
name.
It is a
I
terrible
think
name.
of the orangutan.
I know.
Not a good name.
It is a horrible name. Kang's just a very smart dude. That's the crazy. He's like,
That's it. He's just
yeah,
a dude. Like
he's
it's like
just a
Matt Damon.
genius. He's just a next level genius he's from the 31st century in the comics, and he figures out how to use science and technology to travel through the multiverse and time, and he uses that to basically take over, or try to take over, everything.
Is
Thus
he
the
like
name The
Marvel's
Conqueror.
version of Lex Luthor?
Worse, kind of. I mean,
Like-
yes, similar, but he's even
He's
crazier.
Doctor Who.
Like,
Thanks.
there you go.
Taylor, were you asking who Lex Luthor is? He's
Yeah.
Superman's arch nemesis.
we just switched to DC on you.
Why
Yeah, we're
would I
gonna-
know that? Why?
Yeah.
Do I know much about Batman?
Yeah,
No.
Matson. Why?
You know what Lulu's spring collection is going to be.
Hey, I'm good at psych, guys. Let's go back to psychology.
Yeah, no shit.
Yeah,
I was intrigued by that.
I'm better at that.
Yeah. So it was a fun episode. I liked it. I'm excited for the rest. Interested to see what the Moon Knight's going to do without the Moon Knight powers.
Yeah, what's that going to be like?
I mean, obviously, Mark
Madden
Spector has
Crazy.
the skill set, right? To
Just fall back
Do-
on your Navy SEAL training.
In
Yeah,
the
you-
books, is his third personality. Matson said it was like a cab driver. Is that what it is
Yeah.
in the comics?
yes.
So how does that play into the other two personalities in the comics?
They may not do it.
So
No,
in
just
the comics,
but if they don't do it, I want to know the comics.
yeah, no, it's a great question. So in the comics, there's Mark Spector is the main identity.
He's a
and
presenter. Yeah.
he is just as he is in the show. He's a former Marine, become mercenary, who just has all those fighting skills. And then you have Steven, who is a millionaire, basically persona of a millionaire, but he also works very closely with the police. So when they need to work the system, like money, things like that, Steven is the personality that comes out. And then the Jake Lockley, who is the taxi driver, is more of like the investigator. He's like the ears on the ground. So he's in his taxi, he's driving around places, using the taxi as a front to do stakeouts, to do investigations, things like that. So they work with the police a lot, which is where you'll see the suit version in the comics. With the Steven version of Moon Knight in the comics is actually the suit he wears when he's being a detective with the police, because it's less threatening than the
It's
the
more
full
fancy
suit.
too. So
Yeah. So it's a little easier to talk around, but that's Jake. Jake is more the investigator, the private eye kind of stuff in the comics. It seems like he's going to be ultra violent, do whatever it takes in the show. At least that's
Does
what they
it-
hinted at.
Does the comics talk more about like his history? Because in Khonshu or in the show, Khonshu brought him back to life, right?
Mhm.
And like that he was dead already and they brought him back to life. Did he already have his multiple personalities before he was brought back to life or after he was brought back to life?
So in the comics, it was something that he had
His whole
most
life.
of his life. And my understanding is, and again, I don't know a ton about this comic, but my understanding is he had versions of it as a child. There were some traumatic events as a child,
Ah.
and then it was triggered heavily in the military.
Mhm.
And then that's part of the reason he became a mercenary, was because he couldn't medically be in the military anymore.
Mhm.
And so he became a mercenary. And then as a mercenary, he fell in love with this woman that Layla is kind of a version of, and got married. And then her father was, like they hinted in this episode, did all the research and did that stuff. And then her father is killed in the comic, and he becomes Moon Knight as like some sort of bargain to bring him back, I think, or to keep him alive. It was to keep someone else alive. And again, I don't know enough. My research hasn't dived that deep, but he became it to help someone else. And then he's just kind of stuck with it. But he does die in the comics at one point, and he's died a few times, and then Khonshu brings him back.
Oh, okay.
But we don't know, as far as the comics go, you don't know if he's gonna, once he's not Moon Knight, if he'll live or not.
So it's interesting when you mentioned that he had as a kid childhood trauma. Kids are underdiagnosed with DID, but usually it does come in onset between 5 and 10 years old.
Really?
So when their trauma happens, so he probably slid under the radar because it was so like usually it's seen as just misbehavior or something else, and then they'll finally get diagnosed as an adult because that's when our personalities even out. We're not as hormonal, so we don't go as up and down.
Interesting. It's
Yeah.
interesting you say that too, because in the comics, he gets, when people meet him and see some of the interactions that he has, because it happens a lot in the comics that he argues, the personalities will argue with each other quite a bit.
Mhm.
And a lot of people will have referenced him in the comics as schizophrenic. Now that's the characters in the comics. So he misdiagnosed as schizophrenia.
Mhm.
They constantly, in fact, one of the books or series of books in the comics was all about him being misdiagnosed as schizophrenic instead of DID. So
If you look at their symptom list too, they're pretty similar, but I found an article that shows you the difference. And one is just core identity versus behavior. Schizophrenia is more behavior reactionary versus DID is more, this is my identity and who I am. And that's why people will misdiagnose a lot.
that's cool.
Mhm.
Not for them, but that's cool.
No, it's just interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. All right. Any final thoughts on episode 3 of Moon Knight?
I would like to say I'm no longer Team Amit after Harrow,
You were a team Amit?
Well, I
was.
was thinking
How can you
with
be Team Amit? That's like genocide.
well, I'm in the boat where if you get judged and you're shit, then you die and you don't have to deal
But
with
you
the
can't
world anymore.
predetermine if you choose to follow a behavior, not just because you have evil within you. That's terrible.
Yeah, but then
Sorry.
you don't have to live anymore, and it's great.
No, but then
And
that's
then
terrible because you
if
had
you're
had a whole life
good,
ahead of you.
you're scot free. You can do whatever the fuck
But
you want.
everybody has evil and good within them, and then you're just gonna kill people off because you have evil in you. You're gonna kill
Well,
yourself
I
off.
mean, I'm not in charge of the cult. I'm just over there waving the banner. So I was total team
You
on
have
it.
to get
Alec
judged
just
to
wants
be
a
in the
tattoo.
cult.
He just,
Yes,
he just
I
wants
do want to. I
just
do
wants
want
a
a scale
scales
tattoo. So
Just
Love
go get
it.
the tattoo without being a
But-
dumb butt.
Yeah.
after Harrow was a total ass, I'm back on Team Conchu.
Seriously?
I mean,
Ah,
look,
Why?
neither of these people, neither of these gods are very cool. Like they're both dicks.
I mean, at least one's not encouraging genocide before people actually are dumb.
That's fair. But he does
People
seem to
have to be
like
dumb first to get punished.
yeah,
does
but
seem to
that's just
mentally
whole
torture his
messy
avatars pretty bad.
and-
What?
My only beef with this is why are these gods that they're so all powerful and all they are is taking an overwatching position? They can at least know that this digging out in the desert has a purpose to it instead of just saying, "Oh, he hasn't done anything wrong." Like to me, that seemed weak because they can infer intent and probably could see
No,
him
but
holding
then
a
you're
little
being like,
scabbard
if you
beetle.
do that, Matson, then you're being like Amit, where you're prejudging people before
So
they
Mattson
do this
is
But
Team
thing.
he's
Amit too.
killed people. They
Woo!
said
But-
he hasn't done anything wrong. Then I'm like, well, these
but
gods do
they
allow
are
a
turning
lot
a
of
blind eye
violence.
because they're naive and avoiding. But
I don't know. If I was a god living in the undercarriage, I wouldn't do anything to help anybody out. I just
See?
sit back and enjoy being a god because
just use the
why
humans
would
for
I get
entertainment.
involved?
Yeah. Well,
Exactly.
and truth be told, the gods don't like the humans because they turn their backs on them. They don't worship them anymore. They are away from that, so they don't really care.
Because they made
at
him
the end of
build
the day.
giant pyramids. Like, come on, dude, that's exhausting.
Those are built by aliens.
Yeah. Actually, Kang made him build those, so
Ain't nobody got time for that.
oh shit, what a fun episode. All right. Well, Taylor, thank you so much for joining us. It
Thanks
has
for having
been
me.
you need to come on seriously like every episode because I'm so thoroughly intrigued by the psychology of it all.
Well, this is what happens when I watch movies with her. We get the psychology of things.
I love it. I think
Yeah,
that's
and then
amazing.
he gets a lot of comments like me criticizing him for supporting freaking Amit. Alec, I don't get you, but it's fine.
I just like the road less
I'm
traveled,
judging
the
you.
easy one. If I can absolve myself of all blame by just holding this dude's hand for 30 seconds, I am all in for that.
I liked you until that moment. Now I'm questioning my decisions.
See, and
Kind
I'm
of how
thinking,
most people go when I meet someone new.
I'm thinking
You
the
have to last
actuality of
longer.
what Alec wants is to be able to be the guy that puts the cane on the arms and be like,
You
"Sorry,
wanna
dude,
be the
you're
judger."
fucked."
Do, do, do. Just get the Jeopardy theme song going.
It'd be a very different experience if Alec was in charge.
Oh, the world would be chaos,
I love it.
anarchy.
Heads you live, tails you die, right?
Yeah, that's right. All right. So with that, we will be back to talk more Moon Knight on episode 4. Only 3 episodes left. It's crazy.
Is it just
So,
one season?
Yeah, just one season. They've already confirmed one season, but it's also confirmed that he will be making, as the character Moon Knight, some other appearances in other Marvel properties. We don't know what that means. Chances are the Blade movie, he'll be there. They're pretty
The
connected.
Blade movie.
Yeah, Blade. The
We
character-
could just have a whole podcast of
Matson.
Taylor's confusion of things.
How have you
I'll
not?
explain it to her after the podcast.
Okay.
You sounded so disappointed.
I make your guys' podcast better, okay?
I don't deny that.
Yeah. I give you the real person's view, not the nerdy movie person. The
It's
one
very
that gets
much-
to every
Hey.
movie for
Yeah,
No, I feel
JJ.
judged.
oh no, I'm talking about my husband.
Oh, okay.
I gotta
Gotta
hold my
use
tongue
that
here.
AMC membership.
I also have ADHD, guys, so watch movies with
enough.
that.
Well, no thanks. I do it all the time. So Moon Knight also is a part of one called the Midnight Suns, which is like the darker one. That seems to be where they're heading. So Black Knight, Blade, Moon Knight, the Werewolf at Midnight, that all of those are part of the Midnight Suns. Yeah. And there's a Halloween special from Werewolf at Night. So that one's coming. So my guess is we'll see more Moon Knight, but he's not getting another season of his show. So
Is it just because the storyline ends, like with
Ye-
the Battle of Ammit and the other one? So there's not much more to go off of.
yeah,
Spoiler.
I don't know that there's a lot of story that's interesting enough to keep him around as far as having his own thing. But I think what they're doing with a lot of these shows is that's the best part about the comics is you have deep, huge books that are like massive and tell a lot of story. And then you have these smaller books that lead into the next big story. With the movies, it's always been kind of like really off-putting sometimes because you go from Iron Man 1 to Iron Man 2, and then you have all these skin. You're like, where the hell is all the rest of the Avengers? Why aren't they helping? Well, what these shows are starting to show is that there's other things going on that other people are working on. So anyway, I could go on and on. We should move on to the next piece of what we're doing. And with that, Mattson, tell everybody where they can find us.
Yeah, if you enjoyed this episode and having one of our common folk, aka Taylor, on here and therapist, and you learned a lot and you want to hear more, check us out on whatsaverdict.com to see what's upcoming. Check us out on our social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can listen to us wherever good podcasts are found, like Spotify, Apple, Ghana, Stitcher, to name a few. But we appreciate the listens.
Sweet. Again, Taylor, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having.
Yeah, of course. And
Thanks,
we'll
Tay.
be back next week for the next episode of Moon Knight.
Be excited.
Mm-hmm.
This is actually one that I'm really excited about, guys.
I love it.
Like willingly watch this.
Oh, yeah. Me too. As always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Cinemagic out.
Whoa!